All right, this is the Story Series podcast where we tell the stories behind the people. Rick Suvalle, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm psyched you're here. You are a screenwriter and executive producer. You're the creator of Dewdrop Diaries for DreamWorks and Netflix, Thomas the Tank Engine, All Engines Go for Mattel. You've written on many animated shows over the years, as well as live-action movies. I'm really excited to dig into all that. But I like to take it back and start with origin stories. So if you could, where did you grow up?
Okay, I grew up in Wayland. I'm going to apologize in advance for my poor performance here today because I get a little nervous when I'm on camera. I'm just prefacing that right now. But I guess the good news about being on camera is that people can finally see that I am the Brad Pitt of preschool animation writing. And for the people that are not watching, I am really the Danny DeVito of preschool animation writing. And I guess next to you, it's like twins with Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh, yeah. So, since you are a foot taller than me.
That's right.
So my origin story. So I grew up in Wayland, Massachusetts. It's a small suburb 18 miles west of Boston. It was a pretty normal life. No trauma, no bad stories. I had very supportive parents. They were very supportive of my endeavors into the arts. They bought me Final Draft when I first heard about it and wanted to be a screenwriter. I think I was still in high school at the time. My mother was a kindergarten teacher, and so she was very creative and brought that kind of creativity into the home. And my father was he was a vice president at Polaroid. So we had the pre-Instagram life with tons and tons of photos, many duplicates of photos from different angles. So it was great.
Wow. And so would you describe yourself as an especially creative child? Were you reading a lot, comic books? Were you drawing?
Very early on, I liked writing. I was in 6th or 7th grade. And we were able to we had a study hall, and we had just this one period where you could just kind of do nothing, where you're supposed to kind of do your homework, or they said you could journal, and I just wrote short stories. And that really kind of started me realizing what you can do with the written word.
So was there a piece of entertainment, like a book or a movie, that kind of pushed you into writing? How did you even know writing was something that you could do?
Someone gave me a Sid Field screenwriting book. A friend took a course one summer and he said, oh, I don't need this stuff. He gave me the Chinatown script and the Sid Field book, and I was reading it.
Those are two of the most valuable things that an emerging screenwriter could have. I guess he gave up pretty early.
He did. Now he's a child psychiatrist. He's doing well. Okay. Yeah, I mean, he just gave it to me because he knew I had this kind of interest. And I just really loved movies. I was always like the movie trivia guy. Friends would try and trip me up and say, hey, how many movies? Can you name 3 movies that Matt Dillon's in? And I would I'd give him 4 or 5. And they're like, whoa, I didn't even know about half of those. So, but I always loved movies. I mean, Star Wars was that influential, moment for me. I was 4 years old and I saw it in the theater 6 times when it first came out. And so I just really opened up the world of cinema to me. So I really just wanted to be part of that process. And so I think the combination of writing, and I had when I went to high school, we had to write papers and we had to write some stories, and I really enjoyed it. And I actually wasn't a very good student. I had this really hard English teacher named Mrs. Lampert. Shout out Mrs. Lampert. And she was really tough on me, and I always kept wanting to take the honors courses, even though I was kind of a C student, and she let me continue taking courses with her. And she was very hard on me, but I think it really made me a better writer.
And when you were in high school looking to college, where did you decide to go? And did you, at this point, even consider writing as a career?
I did. I mean, I went to Hofstra University in Long Island, New York, and I went for kind of film and writing. So I think at that point I knew what I wanted to do. When I was in high school, I had the opportunity to write a play, and it got picked up by the Massachusetts Drama Festival, High School Drama Festival. And so I got to direct that play too. So I really knew before I went to college what I wanted to do.
Was that an original play?
It was an original play.
Wow. What was the play? What was the story?
Gosh, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about like a couple breaking up, a very classic high school thing. But it was like I think they were older than me, the characters. It was this kind of this emotional breakup, and it was kind of this long scene. But I got to direct it, and it was super fun. I just knew I really wanted, some kind of writing and possibly directing to be part of my life.
Do you remember what it was like the first night of your play, just seeing something you wrote on stage? I mean, that's pretty cool.
It was exhilarating, and it was only one night. It was this big festival, and I think they probably had like it was one of those things that started at 8 a.m. and probably went till 8 p.m. with all the different plays, and I had to quickly bring in the sets and have everybody do their own makeup and costume. It was very Dogma 95 style with the play.
Yeah.
And so I just really enjoyed that whole process of being there and writing. And I did all the plays in high school. I was a theater kid. And so that whole idea of kind of just, I loved the acting, but I really loved the writing process too.
And how are you thinking of your life post-college? Was there any sort of like bridge to a career, or were you just in the moment in college and then I'll figure it out when I graduate kind of thing?
I did want to direct, and I've since just decided that's just not for me. And when I came out to LA, I like I said, I acted and I did plays in college too, but I lost my hair really early. Like I started losing my hair at 21, and I was like, I don't want to be in front of the camera anymore. And so I really wanted to concentrate on being behind the camera. And I just love the writing because, obviously when you're just starting out, you don't get directing jobs, but you can just write.
So you graduate, and presumably you have some sort of plan to come out to Los Angeles. What did you think you were going to do?
I thought maybe I could get a job doing coverage or a PA on a film. Just
some
anything.
entry level.
Yeah, any entry level thing. I didn't think I was going to magically be, get a job writing movies. But independent film was really huge in the 90s. And so I thought, there was a chance maybe I could make a film and, find the right people. And, because my first script was this total independent film, which is, now I look at it and it's terrible. And I can't believe that, some people saw something in there to give me another chance or liked what I did. But I don't know. I knew I wanted to make a movie. And so I was doing all that. I was writing scripts for me to produce and direct. And so they were definitely more of an independent angle in the beginning. And then, I did get my first taste of TV relatively quick when I moved out here. And that changed the trajectory for me.
Okay, but when you first arrived, where are you living?
We lived in West Hollywood. I moved out with my wife. We met in college. We were not married at that point. And so we drove out in my old crappy Mazda, and we got an apartment in West Hollywood for $600 a month. And
That's pretty exciting though.
Yeah.
Like just a new young couple driving out west. She was also East Coast, or was she?
She was.
Yeah.
She's from Maine, and we both met at Hofstra. And so she initially wanted to be an actress too, and thought, yay, this is a great opportunity to go out to LA and check it out.
And so what was the first job that you ended up finding?
I got a job very quickly within the first month of being in Los Angeles editing, kind of corporate videos and just real bad, made for, I don't even know what they were made for, just industrial type video type things.
Yeah, but it's money.
It was money, and I was kind of, it's a quasi part of the industry because, I am learning how to cut things together and tell a bit of a story, even if they're boring stories. And so it was kind of fun. And also it was this weird job where there was also a part of it where I was just duplicating movies as well, besides editing. So I would have time to write. So I would longhand write during my shift, my scripts. And then on the weekends, I'd wake up super early at 6 while my wife was still sleeping. The computer's in the bedroom. So she's annoyed by my clacking of the keys, but I would write up everything I did and rewrite as every Saturday morning.
And at the same time, you're trying to get yourself out there as a writer, trying to get your material in the hands of anyone who will take a look at it?
Yeah, I got a mentor right away, and that really helped. And he was very influential in helping me start my career. But at the same time, I was, I joined the Independent Film Project and was going to their events and any networking I could do and taking meetings, going to parties and stuff like that, trying to bump into people.
And it sounded like it worked. So you said that you fell into TV rather quickly. What was that opportunity that you found?
Yeah, when when I moved out to Los Angeles, I got, a call from my grandmother and said, you have to call my best friend's kid. He's a producer on Law and Order, and he's a writer there too, and you should meet with him. So I said, sure. So I called him up and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember my grandmother. And he's like, after a second, he's like, oh yes, of course I do. And then he said, well, come on up to the Universal Lot and we can have lunch and talk. And he's 20 years my senior. And so I went out there and I think it was pre-moving out to LA. I was moving out in 6 months, but I wanted to do an exploratory trip. And so we met and I put on a jacket and tie and went out to the Universal Lot and it's like 100 degrees outside.
Which is so not the dress code for writers.
Well, that's the first thing he told me. He goes, I hope you're not wearing that jacket and tie for me. And I said, of course not. I'm going to a funeral later. No, I mean, I
own
know
funeral after this.
Fortunately, he didn't ask why, but I think he knew. I mean, he was being kind. But he did say to me that day, and this is the mid '90s. He's like, you got to dress like a creative. You're a writer. You got to wear your ripped jeans or your flannel shirt and not shave for 3 days when you have a meeting. And like, you have to show them that you are creative. Meanwhile, he dresses to the nines all the time. He was Mr. Slacks and button-down shirt and stuff like that. But still, he knew who the independent writers are and what they would do. And so he said, you got to dress the part. But we really bonded that day. We were both lactose intolerant. We both played clarinet in the 6th grade. And so he kind of took me under his wing. I had found out that he had written like one of the most famous episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I was this huge fan. So, and the Star Trek Voyager had just come out, and he's like, what do you want to write? I said, if you wrote for TV, what do you want to write? And I said, well, there's a new Star Trek out. He's like, I'll get you in. He said, why don't you write a spec Star Trek Voyager, and I will give you notes. And he worked with me for 6 months, giving me draft after draft of notes, really to get it into what Star Trek would like. And I pitched the episode, or he sent my script over, and it got me a meeting with them. And,
wow.
I don't know if that was another pity meeting, but
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Meeting's a meeting.
Yeah. So they I had the meeting, and they said, look, your script's great, and you clearly know this universe. Even though we're going to pass on this one, please come back to us with other ideas.
What was it like getting notes on your spec script from a veteran writer? How did you take that feedback?
Well, because he was a professional and knew what he was doing, I took the notes. Like, I didn't question any notes. I didn't go, well, I meant to do that. I didn't have that kind of feeling that you get when your friend or your mom gives you a note, and so I was just kind of like, sure. So I took his notes because I figured if he's going to recommend it, he's got to see his changes. And and it worked out well. And I learned that. I learned that lesson very early. If that senior person has those type of notes, you really have to take them seriously. Eventually, I got my own internal Geiger counter where I'm like, well, that note doesn't quite work. And now I don't take every note I get.
Yeah, but that's a great contrast to some up-and-coming writers who are very defensive about their work. And you have to have a certain openness to grow.
Yeah, I see that all the time with new writers. Like, yeah, like I was saying before, I meant to do that. No, that's supposed to happen. I'm like, doesn't matter if it doesn't work, And so I see that too many times. People get too defensive about that kind of thing.
And you had this great meeting that didn't result in a job, but it was a great general meeting. They got to know you. I mean, to be brought in on a script like that is not common, I think. And so so what happens after the meeting?
It didn't go anywhere, but it was a great feeling. It felt validating for someone to like my script. And again, I don't know if they were blowing smoke at the time, but it didn't feel like it. So, or I was too new to know, but it just really encouraged me to keep going.
What a great exercise too.
Yeah.
To write a script, to come up with ideas. And so what else were you doing to try to get yourself out there at that time?
Well, my mentor, his name is Morgan Gendel, fantastic writer.
And how did you meet him?
This is the one through my grandmother.
Oh, that's his name.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, so, grandma, all right.
Yeah. So he really liked my writing and he liked that I took the notes. So he said, I've got an idea for a comedy. And I've just, I haven't really written many features. Would you want to write it with me? So we kind of got together and we spent probably the next year writing that script together, going out to bars to meet and just kind of writing and having burgers and beers. And it turned out great. And he had written some stuff for William Shatner, the tech war movies. And so William Shatner attached himself to the project at one point to be the dad in the movie. And so it was just a really exciting time. And he was also trying to help me get jobs. You know, he would put me up for PA jobs and with people he knew. And so that was just, it was a really exciting time. So, but I was also out there trying to just meet as many people as possible, sharing my new specs and writing new specs all the time. I was always writing.
Always writing. What was your first paid writing gig?
Yeah, well, thanks to Morgan, a couple years later, he was the showrunner of Pamela Anderson's V.I.P., her follow-up to Baywatch, and he brought me in to write my first freelance.
Amazing. And she's like a kind of a secret agent, or right in that. I
Yeah,
remember.
she's the premise of the show is people don't even realize this. Bryan Cranston owns this bodyguard agency, and he has to get out of town real quick, so he just leaves it to his bodyguards and all the debt. And the bodyguard agency needs a new figurehead owner. And they see her on TV, you know, like trip and fall with some celebrity. And they say, she's perfect. So they bring her in as this figurehead owner of the agency because she blows up on like a TMZ type show. And so they can bring in clients. But she's this, you know, ditzy blonde character who's like, will wear a pink cat suit for a heist and things like that. And so it was just a fun syndicated action show. We, you know, the ratings were great. We did 4 seasons, and, you know, it was just a great first opportunity. So he was showrunner of that show, and he brought me in to do my first freelance, and that turned into a second freelance. And then it turned into me getting on staff and going up the ranks over the 4 years.
And you're how old when you get on staff?
Gosh, I was probably
30 yet? No.
No.
It's amazing.
Let's see. Yeah, I was probably like, you know, 25.
That's young.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so what was that writer's room like back then?
It was great. It's a little different than like I think what we classically think of it all. I mean, we had a team of writers. We had you know, in live action there's all different levels of writers with different producer titles. But there was probably about 5 of us plus the showrunner, and we would just kind of you know, we would pitch our story ideas as a group, and we would just really blue sky the ideas. And then, you know, if it was your idea, you would be assigned that script and go off and write an outline. And then everybody would give notes. And, you know, the interesting thing was Morgan would say, like, just take the ones you want. And I, you know, being new, I still had the sense to say, look, if someone's giving me a note and it sounds good or an idea, take it, because my name's going to be on that script. It just makes me look good. So I just, you know, really took in everything that people gave me, and the scripts turned out great.
How did it feel? You came out to Los Angeles to do this, and now you're doing it very young and getting paid.
It felt amazing. I mean, I remember the day I got to quit that day job editing crappy industrials. I just remember going in. They're like, I was like, hey guys, I was making like $400 a week, and I was like, I gotta go. I got a job writing for TV. And they're like, oh, cool. And they were actually very happy for me. And then, I don't know, I was elated. I mean, especially that first time you see your name on screen. Because I remember when I was in college, I did an internship that turned into a PA job on The Next Karate Kid with Hilary Swank was The Next Karate Kid. And so I was on that, and they said I was going to get credit as a PA. And I was so excited. And I took my girlfriend, who's now my wife, to see it in the theater, and all that, and the credits roll, and my name is not there. And so I was devastated. So when I finally got that real credit on a show that I wrote, I was just so happy. And that first one, it was story by Morgan and me, and I was even more excited because he was my idol at the time. And so to share story credit with that person, like some people are like, oh, I want all story credit. I'm like, no, this was amazing. And so, yeah, just seeing, and I still get, you know, the little goosebumps when a new episode of mine airs and I get to watch it for the first time. I just love that feeling.
You haven't lost it.
No, not at all.
Were you allowed on set as a TV writer, a live action TV writer?
Oh yeah. I mean, even on that first episode, when I got invited to the set on my first freelance for V.I.P. And I showed up, and they handed me the script, and I was like, flipping through it, I'm like, oh my God, I did a terrible job because everything's changed. And so Morgan pops in at some point and says, hey, what'd you think? What do you think of the script? I'm like, I didn't do very good, huh? And he's like, no, I was coming here to see if you wanted to do another one. I was like, what? And he told me right then and there that, you know, I gave him the good bones of a script. I didn't know the show because it was new. There was it was just a couple scripts to read. You didn't see any video in advance. So he said, you gave us good bones. The structure's all there. So we just had to rewrite, you know, dialogue and stuff like that just for the characters that you don't know. And I learned that lesson. I'm so glad I learned that lesson because I would have been like, if I saw that on TV and I didn't go to set and have that day, I probably would have been like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing. But it turned into a second episode, then turned into the staff job. And so I was on set for both of my freelance episodes for the majority of it. And then once I was on staff, Morgan allowed us to produce our own episodes, even as staff writers. And so we were at the page turn. We'd go to location scouts. We would be in casting.
And what's the page turn?
The page turn is when all the departments get together. Right, the day before you start shooting, and you go through the script one page at a time, and every department, like wardrobe's like, do you want, you know, this dress? Do you want this in the room? Like, you say you're in a florist shop, can we just have roses? You know, they would go, every department would go through what their needs are. So we would read the script aloud, no cast, because the TV schedule is so tight that they're shooting while we're prepping it.
They're shooting the last episode while you prep in the next one.
Actually, it's a week before. So the minute one starts shooting, yours starts prepping and you have the page turn right away. And so we go through and like I get to answer questions because they're like, you know, Morgan would be like, well, Rick, what were you thinking here? I'd be like, oh, well, like, you know, a yellow cab, not like, you know, not a checkered cab, you know, things like that. I mean, they really want to know the details because they're going to get what I asked for. So it was amazing to go on the location scouts and having input in casting. Like I even cast my little sister.
You did? For what role?
She was the bitchy waitress #1, but she got some lines.
Wow.
And you know, she probably shouldn't hear this, but you know, I remember we were like, Morgan said, we can just give her the part, but I don't want to just give it to her. I want her to feel like she earns it. So let's have her come in for the casting. She'll be the only one reading for waitress that day, but she'll get the role. And I was like, great.
Wow. And what are your parents thinking at this time, just seeing you out there doing this?
They were super excited. I mean, to see me living my dream and doing this, and you know, live action TV pays a lot more than animation. And so I
wouldn't know, but I've heard.
So it made a great living, and so my parents were really proud of that too. That I was doing it. I was doing what I wanted to do. I do remember though going back. I mean, nobody understands what we do. You know, so I remember going back to a wedding, a high school friend's wedding, and my parents were there, and all my family friends' parents were there. And so they'd be like, oh, Ricky, I hear you're writing for television. And I'm like, it's not Ricky, but okay. And then they'd be like, so you don't write the actual words that they say, right? I'm like, no, I do. Oh, so you don't write like where they're located. Well, I do that too. Like, really? You know, it was that kind of, that situation. So, and I still get that today. Like, you know, even when I talk to my parents, you know, like, I'm like, oh, I'm up for this gig. And they're like, okay, cool. And like, they just don't get it. I'm like, they don't know when I'm like, I really want the encouragement and I really don't want the encouragement.
Just curious, any interaction with Pam Anderson on set?
Oh, for sure.
Really?
For sure.
What was that like?
Well, she was executive producer.
Yeah.
As well. And it was interesting. You know, she amazingly, you know, had this photographic memory, or I'd say a semi-photographic memory. So she wouldn't read the scripts. She would just look at the sides like 5 minutes before and she would get pretty close.
Wow.
But one of our jobs was babysitting the words to make sure she didn't she ad-libbed, and she had fantastic ad-libs, but we want to make sure we stayed on story point, you know, and make sure we didn't miss story thing.
And at that point, that's post Baywatch, you said. So she's like the biggest thing in the world. I mean, she's huge.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of, you're kind of like in awe of like working for her, especially my first real job. You know, I'm working for this huge celebrity. And the fun thing about that show was, every week we would open with an action teaser with a celebrity of the week, where Pam is protecting some random celebrity. So like she was friends with Jay Leno, so he did a few, but it'd be just random celebrities. Like in one of mine was Jim Jarmusch, the independent director.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, I'm a huge fan of like Down by Law and all of his movies. And so he comes in and he was weird, man. He said like, my favorite shows are Space Ghost, Simpsons, and V.I.P. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And then he didn't seem to know where the camera was when we were filming him, though. I was like, wow, okay, this kind of tracks. But but it was super fun. I mean, the funny thing is we would get all the the 80s celebrities that we grew up with, we would suggest them to Morgan. We're like, can we get like Lee Majors in here? The Bionic Man, and like, oh yeah, he's like perfect. Pam's dad, or Mark Hamill playing Pam's uncle, a Canadian Mountie. And so we had a ton of fun with all the celebrities and writing like real self-deprecating teasers for them. So it was awesome. So it was great. Your question was about working with Pam. She was great. I mean, it was a fun experience. I just really, it was a great first experience to be on that show.
It's a great, any job, let alone your first job. So you do that for about 4 seasons. And so what comes next?
Then,
and when did you know they weren't going to pick it up?
So after the 4th season, there was talk of a 5th season, and it kind of lingered through that summer. But Pam kind of didn't want to do the grind of every day. She had 2 young kids, and she just didn't want to do the grind. So she wanted to do this kind of Chrissy Snow, Three's Company thing where she just kind of would show up at the end or the beginning and bookend the show like, hey guys, how was the case this week? And, people tuned in to watch her. So the investors kind of said, nah, it's not going to work. So after that, it was kind of a drought for me. I had a tough time. I did a little bit of animation. I did an episode or 2 of a Spider-Man series for MTV, and then Astro Boy. I did 2 episodes of that. And then
big titles.
They were. But then there was just kind of nothing for a long time. I mean, almost 3 years. I would write every day, and I had my manager and trying to get stuff for me. But it was really tough because syndication had just died. And I'm coming off a syndicated show. And my agent at the time, I'm coming off this cheesy action show, and he's coming off of, he's got these. I was the executive story editor on that show at the final season. He had the executive story editor to Alias and the executive story editor to 24. And if he's submitting all 3 of us for a show, they don't even open up my script. And that's the only credit I have. So I was having a real tough time getting work, and I ended up dropping my agent and trying to find another agent. And so yeah, it was a real tough time. I mean, and then eventually, we had that like stock market bottom out at one point, and we were having a second kid. So it was just kind of a tough time in terms of, I remember it's interesting story about like kind of fate, but I remember my wife said to me, look, you got to get a job. You got to get a real job, and like, I appreciate your writing. It's been fantastic for us, but you got to get a job. And she's like, get a job outside of LA at Target if you have to, don't. You don't have to get one in LA where you bump into the people So I was like, no, I can't do Target. I couldn't do it. And so I applied to a job that was in Malibu doing some kind of sales. And so put on that jacket and tie that I wore for my meeting with Morgan, many years before. And I drive out to Malibu for this job that seemed to have potential, too good to be true kind of situation with too much money to be real. But I get there, and it's this cattle call where you're basically selling knives. And it's a pyramid scheme where you get your family to buy the knives. And if they sign up and they sell knives, you get a percentage. It was a Ponzi scheme.
Knives?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, gosh. So I remember being there, and there's all these people there. They're all a few years younger than me at this point. And I remember just kind of being, why am I here? This is terrible. And the owner of the company says, look, if this isn't right for someone, leave now. It's okay. And everybody's sitting there looking around like anything. And I'm like, screw this. I got up and left. And then a few people followed me. And I'm driving home. And it was kind of like, I don't know if you've seen Out of Sight with George Clooney.
Oh, and Jennifer Lopez.
Movie. Yeah,
right?
yeah. And so the opening, he goes in for a job interview, and he's wearing a tie and stuff like that. And there's this great freeze frame where he just rips the tie off. And I really felt like that moment as I'm driving home from Malibu. And then I'm driving, and my manager calls me while I'm driving home and goes, hey, I just got you a gig. It's just writing a pitch for a movie for Syfy, but I don't know, it's like $5,000 and you got the weekend to do it. I was like, this is a reprieve. And so it turned into they bought the movie afterwards, and I got paid to do that, and then a couple more, and then it started me writing made for TV movies for Hallmark and Syfy Channel.
And then you were a working writer again.
I was. I mean, I would write like one a year for several years. But it paid, between the residuals and the fee for a full TV movie and my wife's salary, it was enough to live on.
I mean, it's pretty humbling at that point, right? You're coming off this huge show, you're rising fast, and then comes that like dreaded second job that a lot of people talk about. Sometimes it's harder than the first. Did you feel, maybe it was time to like put writing in the rearview mirror at all?
No, I never did. I mean, it's just something. It's the only thing I know how to do. Like I didn't have a backup career. I mean, I majored in this in college, and so I don't know what else I would have done. I mean, I would have taken whatever job it is, night security. I would just would have taken anything that would give me time to write.
And how did the Syfy pitch come about?
Like I said, my manager, Jeff, who also represents you.
It was Jeff at the time,
Yeah.
Jeff Agassi.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jeff had just called me and said, I got this call. I'm dealing with Syfy Channel. I think it was one of the production companies he was dealing with, and they needed somebody to do a take on this pitch. And they actually read another script of mine that he submitted to them, a horror movie. And the funny thing is, they did pay me to write the movie, but they didn't make it. But then they bought the movie that was the spec that they read and made that movie.
So how are you going about writing the movie? How are you outlining the scenes? What kind of screenwriting tools are you using to write?
I think back in the early days, I was a note card guy. I would buy the 3x5 note cards, and I would kind of plot out the movie that way. So for that one, I did that. I mean, they had the funny thing, it was a movie called Prehistoric Fight Club. And they did not make it, like I said, but all they had was a poster, pre-made. And so it was kind of go anywhere with it. So, so I kind of just pieced it together with the note cards. I mean, I was already writing my own screenplays, so I understood structure and format and stuff like that, and came up with cool things. And then they're like, make sure there's not a certain amount over, not too many special effects. And I had to count them. And they said, count your special effects. And I remember they got that lesson. They're like, whatever number you came up with, it's twice that much, Rick. So
course.
now cut them in half. I was like, all right. So it was a really fun experience, and they really liked the movie. I did a couple drafts of that. And then again, they ended up, the spec that got me the job was the one that they ended up making.
And so now you're making a living once again as a writer, but now this time for live action movies, sci-fi movies. What other kind of jobs are you doing?
Hallmark.
Hallmark.
And I'm also getting, and I also wrote several other ones that didn't get made, but they're paid jobs, and they're paying into the pension and health and getting my health insurance back. So that was a fantastic time for sure.
And how would you go about selling a pitch to Hallmark? Because between sci-fi and, I mean, they're wildly different tones, right? Like, how do you navigate going back and forth?
It was interesting. It was Jeff's suggestion. He was dealing with Hallmark and some of the production companies that Hallmark deals with. And he said, you know what? If you could write a spec movie about that has some horses in it, because the company loves horses that was doing the production company.
Hallmark loves horses.
Yeah, and the production company has horses, and so he says if you could write one that has horses, and he says, I think I might be able to kind of get it in there and maybe set it up. And so I did that. I wrote this movie, and he submitted it. And the funny thing is, I still have the email for this one. I saved this one. So we submitted it. We don't hear anything for like 2 months. And I email Jeff, or I call Jeff, and I say, hey, can you check on this one? He's like, look, if obviously if they wanted it, they would say something. He says, but we can maybe push them, and he's, and see where they're at as a reminder. And so he says, but I really want to wait. And I said, no, let's push them. He's like, well, we can get an answer that would probably be a no if we push them at the wrong time. But he pushed them. And the funny thing about it was, I said, I saw the email. Like Jeff says, I just wanted to check in on this movie from Rick Suvalle. And the president of Hallmark at the time said, oh yeah, we like that one. Let's do it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
The power of following up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So how did you know that you could write a Hallmark movie? Was it a lot of tries and fails in those first few pages, or did it just kind of come naturally for you?
You know what? I mean, like I always do, I study. Like I'm not a horror person. I wrote 3 horror movies for Syfy. So I studied the genre and watched a bunch of movies, watched a bunch of sci-fi movies, watched a bunch of, traditional horror movies.
You immerse yourself.
Yeah, I did. And same thing with the Hallmark. I watched a bunch of the movies, and I kind of saw that there was kind of a bit of a formula there. And I kind of said, okay, here's my idea. How do I lay it on top of that formula and see where it goes? And it worked. I mean, they liked it, but we totally changed it. I mean, the core concept was the same, but it was taking place in Montana. And then they're like, well, we're thinking of going to Ireland. Could you set the movie in Ireland? That's a big rewrite.
That's not just a find and replace.
Yeah. But that was just, it was great. But I mean, there was a lot of other notes too. So I was already getting in and getting my hands dirty on the script, but going there and writing the movie for there was great. It was the same general principle story though.
To go back to it, you just immerse yourself. You didn't, your process stayed the same, whether it was writing on your own, writing for Syfy, Hallmark, you just do your homework.
Yeah, that too. And I know Jeff had been working in that arena, setting up movies. So he had like invaluable notes for me. Like he really said, we need to turn this up here. We need to turn this down here. Can't really say that in this type of movie. I mean, I think the thing about Hallmark movies, people don't realize like a lot of the intricacies, because I get a lot of people that reach out saying, I've got a great idea for a Hallmark movie. And I'm like, that is not a Hallmark movie, And so they just don't get it until you're inside that world. So Jeff had that knowledge. So it really helped guide the process for me so that I wasn't making the mistakes that other writers probably make.
And what's your process for pitching? Do you practice on non-writers? Do you rehearse with your wife, for example?
No, I mean, it's controversial, but I like to read my pitches. If I can get off book, great, but I worry that I'm going to miss something important. So I am I love Zoom pitching now because I can read and they don't know I'm reading.
You can slide the window right over their face and read the document.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I've done that too.
Oh, for sure. So in person, I've been, I'm like, I'm going to read this if you don't mind, but I try to look up at them and gauge their interest as we're going.
And write it in a way that sounds like a conversation.
For sure.
Not a technical document.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking years of learning to make that. But I do remember when I was pitching Dewdrops, DreamWorks wanted me off book, and it was like a 64-page PowerPoint presentation. And I was like, I don't think I could do this. And my executive said, no one knows the show better than you. And it doesn't matter if you miss something because everything's there and they're going to get the materials. And they gave me some statistic like in presentations, people only retain 11%. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, all right. But I was on book. Fortunately, with the presentation there, when you're doing a PowerPoint and they're all looking at the screen, there is the notes part of like Keynote or PowerPoint. So I was able to kind of refer to that, but I would kind of highlight certain words that if I got lost and stuff like that.
So then on that subject, what do you think the purpose of pitching is? If they're going to get all of it at the end anyway, and they're not going to retain most of it, and try to go off book if you can, was their advice. What do you think the purpose of pitching it? What is it supposed to do?
Well, I think they're buying you as much as they are buying the idea. They want to love you. They want to love the idea. So if you go in there and you have no personality and you have this great idea, it's harder for them to want to buy it because if they're going to be working with you to write it and produce it, they have to like you too. And so I think part of it is, and any chance I get to meet someone in person still today, like Zoom's so convenient, but if I have an executive I haven't seen in a long time and I have the opportunity to see them in person, I will drive, to the end of earth to see them in person if I can, because I really think it makes a difference because I think people are so forgettable on Zoom, especially if you're having 10 Zooms a day. Like, you don't even remember what college they went to or what you even talked about. Like, oh, they were a nice person. Like myself, I have to if I take a lot of Zoom meetings with newer writers and I have to actually in my contacts put notes like they went to Michigan State and they have a child. I have to write this stuff down so that I can remember because I want to remember, but it's like, there's just too many and I'm too busy. And so I feel like the execs must be going through the exact same thing. So if I can meet them in person, it's just a lot more memorable.
Yeah, it's a way to sell yourself, not just the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think there's that, and also nobody can sell the idea better than you. Your passion comes through when you're pitching, regardless of Zoom or in person. With a project, if you can pitch it, it's 10 times better than just leaving it with them because you can get them excited about it. And then also things that you worry about are holes in your project. You've already set up that, oh, the good thing is coming. They might push through it and go, oh, I'm waiting for that. Mm-hmm. So I feel like in person is always the way to go.
Now, just backtracking, writing Syfy movies, Hallmark movies, when and how does animation come into play? I know you had written a couple freelances, but when does that become a career shift for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was many, many years later from those first Spider-Man and Astro Boy. I wanted to get into animation because I felt like, I can do this. I like animation, but it always felt like animation was this exclusive club. I couldn't figure out how to get in. And then I was friends with, I still am friends with Guy Tobis, who you created Cocomelon Lane with. And Guy and I have been friends for a while. We met through a WGA event, and we stayed in touch. We'd go out for breakfast every once in a while, come up with some crazy ideas to pitch together. And eventually he had sold the Stinky and Dirty Show to Amazon, and he was kind of trying to figure out, the show once they picked it up. What are certain things about Stinky and Dirty, and what are episode ideas?
It was based on a book series, but he just plucked out two of those characters from the books, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a book called I Stink and another one called I'm Dirty, and it was literally just I'm a garbage truck, I pick up garbage, and he really created an amazing show, a friendship between these two characters. And so I was kind of a sounding board, like on some of his, ideas on what to do with the show. I mean, I take no credit for anything other than listening and saying, "Oh, that's cool," And so, but it was great to kind of really bond with him during that time. And so, once the show officially got picked up, more than just the pilot, he tried to get me into write an episode. And at that point, Amazon actually resisted. They were new, and they were really hoping to get these like Emmy award winning writers in there. And I also didn't have preschool experience. And so they really felt like we want preschool writers in there. And Guy's like, well, I know Rick, writers write, and I can teach him to carrot the sound effects. I can teach him those rules very quickly, and he'll catch on. And they still resisted initially, and then after I think some of those Emmy winners kind of rested on their laurels and flamed out, he said, "Well, now can I give Rick a try?" And they eventually said yes. And Guy also during that time wanted to try and build up my cred in the preschool space and called a bunch of showrunners who gave me freelance episodes. So by the time I did Stinky Dirty, I actually understood a lot of the preschool rules already, and to Amazon's credit, instead of being like, we don't want this guy, they let me do the freelance, they let me do another, and then they made me head writer the next season.
And did you feel like you got the bug for animation on that job?
Oh my God. I mean, it was so invigorating. I mean, as you know, it takes years for that script to actually show up on TV, but watching that process, seeing the animatics come in and seeing artwork come in for the first time, I was just kind of I fell in love, and I really enjoyed writing for preschool too. I mean, it's a very different type of writing, as you know. I mean, it's similar in a lot of ways, but also the comprehension level of your audience is very different. They don't understand ticking clocks, and the stakes are very different. So, and you have to repeat the goal and certain things, And so I felt like I liked that. I liked that challenge of finding new stakes, and something I liked about it was also pushing the envelope on what kids can understand. There's this preconceived notion that kids don't understand, time, but there is a way to help them. There's to understand time. You tell the story in a certain way. And so I always try and, whenever I'm on a new show, I always pitch the episode people don't expect. That's my favorite thing to do. Like on Stinky and Dirty, I did, Dirty is the backhoe loader and Stinky's the garbage truck. And I did one like, Dirty the garbage truck, because Stinky doesn't work, his hopper doesn't work anymore, so Dirty has to be the garbage truck. So I like to do these twists on different shows, and people seem to appreciate those type of episodes because they hear the same ones. The birthday party, they hear the sleepover. They hear the same ones all the time. So if you can pitch something that's different, but still within that world, that's the one that gets through.
And that show marked really your shift into now full-time animation for years after that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that show really kind of launched me, and especially also quickly rising to head writer on that show, I was able to transition that to other jobs and development, and just rack up a lot of credits in that world.
And I want to make sure that we get to Dewdrops. This is your original show that you pitched, got picked up by DreamWorks, airing on Netflix. So take me through the process of how you first came up with that idea and how you brought it to DreamWorks.
Yeah, I have two daughters, and they both have type 1 diabetes. And my wife and I have always taught them that they can do anything. Nothing should stop them. And also by being a girl dad, you become a feminist and you realize, but you also start to see the world in a different way. You also start to see that glass ceiling and and how the world is trying to keep women down at times. And so you see that frustration. And so I really wanted to create a show, a girl power show where girls can do anything and really, embody that spirit. And so, I just started thinking of what could that show be? And my kids are little. So I'm like, hey, maybe if we came up with a show with these little tiny characters that help kids. And that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And when I first pitched it to DreamWorks, they weren't even fairies. And the show is about these little fairies that secretly help kids with little things around the house. I pitched it originally with them being little tiny humans that helped. And then DreamWorks actually really loved the idea when I pitched it to them. I brought in just a 3-page pitch with some artwork that my next door neighbor I paid to come up with, like a little tiny character using a leaf hang glider, or another picture of the little tiny character next to a baby bottle just to show scale. And they loved the idea, but they said, we're looking to do a fairy show. Is there any chance you would be willing to make them fairies? And I was like, I gotta think about that because, I didn't want to say no. I want to get a show off the ground. But I said, if we give them magic and flight, we're taking away that childlike power, the ingenuity and the creativity that these little characters would use to be my metaphor for how kids see the world. I said, however, what if we make them fairies in training? They've got wings, but they can't fly. And because it's a fairy show, we give them just one power that on its own may or may not help, but it won't solve the problems.
So they're not perfect and they can make mistakes, which
exactly
is ripe for comedy. And
yeah, exactly. And so DreamWorks loved that idea because we hadn't seen, fairies in training before. And also this was set in the city because I'm always like, fairies are always in the glen, in the forest. And I'm like, but what if there's fairies in the city?
And in a brownstone apartment.
Yeah, exactly. And so they loved that idea. And so we were just kind of off the races right after that.
And what was that development process like? Like how long were you developing with DreamWorks before it officially got picked up?
It was a long time. It was about 2+ years we were in development.
Is that pretty standard though for development time?
For DreamWorks, DreamWorks is longer than a lot of places, but they really put the time and effort in. We did a lot of visual development. We did a 90-second animatic of this opening teaser, and then we also did a full animation test. So they had to model and rig a character, and the animation test was like 30 seconds, where this little fairy Eden talks to the camera.
30 seconds is a lot.
It is, and it was really cute and really great, and and then we also had at that point like my 3-pager has to turn into a Bible and a script. And, I had to work on the presentation. And so DreamWorks really wants to put their weight behind the project and really have it show. So they spent a lot of money on the whole presentation, not on me, but they spent it on the presentation. And so it was about 2+ years before we actually went in and started pitching it around town.
And what was the phone call like or email letting you know you got the green light?
That it sold to Netflix?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a circuitous story, which I will tell you the short version, which is, so we pitched to Netflix and it went great. It's interesting. At that time, they had a first look deal with Netflix. And so everybody's in that pitch meeting. Like there's 20 people in there. The attorneys for Netflix and DreamWorks are in the meeting, sidebarring while we're talking. I mean, and they had because of the deal, they have 10 business days to tell them yes or no. So I knew the exact day I was going to find out. And so I was driving to this preschool, event that night. And it was 7:00 and I got the call from DreamWorks and they actually said Netflix passed. And I was like, oh. I was like, okay. They're like, but we're going to regroup. We're going to go out to Apple. We're going to go out to HBO Max and wherever else. Don't worry. I was like, okay. So we started pitching. It took a long time to get the meeting. So we pitched Apple and HBO Max, and Apple was interested. And while they were kind of negotiating with them, one of the executives at the Apple meeting left and went to Netflix. And then Netflix, one of the reasons Netflix passed on the show was they already had a fairy show, and they said they didn't really want to be the fairy network. But apparently in the time that executive left Apple and went to Netflix, their fairy show actually fell out. And that executive said, I just heard Rick's pitch at Apple. They're like, oh, it's still available? They called up and that day I got the call.
Wow.
But I knew it was a yes because it was a FaceTime call from the top executive there. And I was like, FaceTime. I'm like,
Right.
this has got to be good.
They're going to say no to your face.
Yeah.
Wow. How did that feel?
It was, pure elation. I was just, there was no words. I was just like, yeah. I already had a job at the time, so I'm like, I gotta give my notice and all that stuff. But I was so overwhelmed and so excited. This was going to be my first time, really executive producing and show running, and it's an original creation. I just felt so excited, and it was just that phone call. I was just on cloud nine for days.
Yeah. And you have that custom DreamWorks logo tailored to your show.
Yep.
Which is just so, come on, that's friggin' awesome.
Yeah, super fun to make that too and come up with the brainstorming session for that one. And it was the idea of our line producer. She says, well, DreamWorks kind of looks like DoWorks. What if we did that? And I was like, this is great.
Come on, that's so cool. So you are head writer, EP, you're show running your own show. You have to put a writer's room together. So what do you look for when you're hiring writers?
This was another example of a freelance room. And so it was me show running and head writing, which is not that big of a deal in the beginning because you're just doing prep. But once you start getting into animatics and I'm giving music notes and I don't have time, at that point, DreamWorks let me bring in a staff writer, which it was the team of the Bergs, Becky Wangberg and Sarah Eisenberg. And they came in, and I secretly knew I was going to make them story editors very quickly, but I couldn't tell them. And so I'm like, guys, just take the job. Trust me, you're gonna want this job. So after 6 weeks, I was able to bump them up to head writers on the show and work under me.
In general, what are you looking for when you're interviewing writers?
I'm not opposed to people I don't know. I use tons of freelancers I didn't know on Dewdrops, but I really wanted someone I had actually worked with to be in that position so I could know their work. And they had done a Thomas and Friends for me.
Which is another show you developed.
I developed
before that
and
one.
produced that. And so they did one for me and it was really funny. And I really loved working with them. They just had this great symbiotic relationship. And they really are one person when they're working together. And they were just so great. So I really I tried them out with that for a freelancer real quick. And they were very quick to adapt to my style. And that's the key you really want in a story editor, that they can bring their own voice, but also mimic your voice at the same time. And that's a hard skill to do, to bring both. So they brought some great personality to it, as well as, were able to match what I was doing. So they were just fantastic. In terms of, back to your other question, assembling a room, we had a script coordinator who was a writer, and so he was part of my room. We had a non-writing showrunner, Aliki Theophilopolis. She's going to kill me for bastardizing her name there. But she's a great creative force, so I brought her into the writer's room too, so that we would have this group and these voices, so that when we broke stories, I would bring in the freelancer, script coordinator, Aliki, myself, and we would kind of break stories that way. So we made a room out of no room.
A strength of yours that I know firsthand is your ability to manage difficult personalities. Where do you think that comes from?
Gosh, I don't know where it would come from. Because I don't recall having too many difficult people in my life when I was a kid. But I'm good at that. I just think I have a good even temper, and I don't take things too personally when it especially comes to business. When I was younger, I did. And I just feel like also becoming a showrunner later in my life, I was able to appreciate it a bit more, and also kind of sit back and realize I don't have to be that person who pretends to know everything. I can ask for help and not worry about it. Doesn't affect my ego in any way. So I feel like, I think a lot of people think certain executives are difficult when they're not. They're just, it's their delivery of how they impart the news to you or the notes. And I'm like, let's take a step back. Let's digest it. I have a rule. I never read notes on my phone because they look like they're 10 times longer.
I know that's your rule, and I've broken it. And I always, especially, the worst thing you can do is right before bed, open up a notes email.
Yes.
Read it on your phone. It always looks longer. It always looks worse.
Yeah. And also it's like the other thing is like, sure, write that angry email and don't send it, at first. And then because usually I'm like, when I was younger, I'd be like, this is terrible because this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd be like, 2 seconds after I hit send, I'd be like, oh crap, I could fix that with one line, and I never would have had to even have a conversation with them.
If you're emotional, you're not going to think of the solution.
No, you're not. And so I feel like, I don't know. I do feel like my experience and age have helped me deal with difficult people in terms of, I'm like, it's not that important. It's like we are making fun children's television. We're trying to impart a message, but at the same time, it has to be fun for all of us. And so if you're going to be angry all the time in your job, it's not worth it.
In your career, working across so many different mediums, does someone like you ever get pigeonholed?
I think so. I mean, right now I don't mind being pigeonholed in preschool, but I recently was suggested for a 6 to 11 show. For your listeners who are not familiar, it's totally separate. It's like SpongeBob is more like 6 to 11, and Preschool is more like, Thomas and Friends, All Engines Go. Or, I'm just trying to think, Barney is preschool. That's a younger preschool.
Mm-hmm.
But, I didn't get the job because they said I didn't have enough 6 to 11 experience. And I'm like,
you have literally preschool, you have adult, you have, every age group. And it's like the one gap is,
I know. But I do. I mean, and I'm also a realist. It's like, I'm not going to get a job on a sitcom or on like the next CSI because my experience doesn't translate. And they do want people pigeonholed that they take into those jobs. They do want someone with experience writing for Law and Order to go to CSI and, and that kind of thing. So it can be good and bad. And so, I mean, I do feel like I have crossed a lot of genres. And so that's been very exciting. But at the same time, I do understand the uphill battle if I ever wanted to be in a sitcom or even just selling a feature. All my movies have been TV movies. I may have sold a feature or two, but they didn't get made. So I'm still just it always seems like square one.
You think writers can be, so experienced in one area and a new writer in another area, even if they've been doing it 20 years? It's like, well, you haven't done this exact thing. So there's a learning curve.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And how do you handle that kind of rejection?
Again, being a bit older now, I just take it on the chin and just keep going. I mean, sure, I have a moment of sadness. I like to say like, if I've got a big project or a job and it doesn't work out, I just let myself be sad for a day. And then I move on and I start working on my next project, or I use that as fire to sell. Like if I pitch somewhere and they pass, I'm like, this is the fire to just sell it somewhere else and show that person. I
love that. Use it as fire.
I do.
How has your definition of success changed over the years?
Success for me, is working. And I just love to work. And that was an interesting thing. Like after coming off of Dewdrops, I think a lot of people said, oh, he just is going to want to be a showrunner again. And of course I do. But at the same time, I love to write. So I'm like, I'm open to freelance. I'm open to staff. I'm open to head writer. It doesn't matter. I just like to work. And to me, success is just getting out there and doing the work.
Yeah. So let's shift to when you were nearing the airing date for Dewdrop Diaries. Take me to that day or night. What was that like for you? How did you celebrate? Where were you watching it?
I'd obviously seen every episode 1,000 times.
That's as a showrunner.
Yeah, as a showrunner. And there's only one where I'm like, oh, if I ever have to see this one again, towards the end of that one, I'm like, this is the one episode I don't like.
Oh, you don't have to say it, but what about it? Was it a script problem or an animation problem or just something that tweaks you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a story about like an animal that doesn't speak, right? And so it's just like, I don't know. The story was just dumb. And it has nothing to do with the writer who wrote it or anything like that. It was because I approved it and I did my rewrites.
It's your fault.
Yeah. And so it's like, so I don't know. It just, the story is just grating to me versus it just didn't have the fun of other ones.
And that can happen. I mean, it's an imperfect medium. You're doing so many.
Yeah. I mean, we did 52 and I like 51 of them.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, so I had seen them, and I do know that like right before the show aired on Netflix, they gave me a preview code so I could watch on Netflix in advance. That's what they do, because I'm the only one that was willing to QC every episode, to go through and watch every episode and see if there's any mistakes.
Well, see, and that's that's shows you what a creator will do for their show.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's plenty of things I've done for free. And so that I'd already seen it on the platform and it was super exciting to see like, there's that splash screen.
The Netflix logo.
All that stuff was fantastic. But the actual, coming out of COVID, and DreamWorks wasn't doing the big parties like they used to do. And so I threw a party at my house. You were invited, but you got COVID, I believe. So
better to have it before than bring it to your party.
Right.
That's right. It
Yeah.
was. I remember that.
So I did a Dewdrops party at my house, and I invited like our most of our crew was in Paris. So, but all of LA based, our executives and our team in LA, I invited all of them to our house. And we did a kind of a screening of the first 2 episodes, and we had like, my wife made Dewdrops cocktails, and we printed up little graphics showing like the different. We did like empanadas, but but they had funny names that were related to the Dewdrops and stuff like that. So it was a great time. It was so good to see everybody, and I think everybody was so appreciative to have an opportunity to show, to see the show together and see the hard work that they put in. So it was a wonderful experience for sure.
Let me ask you some questions for emerging writers.
Sure.
When does a writer need representation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need it until as soon as you're staffed, especially in animation. Like this is really what I know more. You want that agent or manager to be excited about your career and want to get you that next job. And you have that momentum by being on staff. If you've just written 2 freelances, it's really hard to get representation. And in animation, it's really word of mouth in terms of getting your next jobs, especially freelancers. People are always recommending people they like. So you want to get out there. You want to, my advice to like emerging writers is to go out and meet as many people as possible. I've got a lot of, new writers who've written for a couple episodes, things. We'll want to get together for coffee or a Zoom. And I'm totally happy to meet with them. And, I don't have a job to give them right now, but maybe I can impart a little advice or something. But it's good to get to know them so that when I do get my next show, I'll be like, you know what, that person was really nice. I wrote down notes about them in my contact file. I do like them, and so then I can call them up and use them. And I've done that before for sure.
And what advice do you have for writers to stay on people's radar? Whether it's someone who meets you, what's a good way to stay in touch with you, or just other industry people in general? I feel like so many writers are worried that they're going to bother people. They don't want to bother anyone, so they stop themselves from sending any sort of email. And I think that that's a mistake. I think that there's a certain amount of follow-up that's appreciated by people on the receiving end. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a delicate balance. I mean, I think you absolutely have to follow up. You have to, but you have to kind of it's hard to feel out when you are bugging them too much. Because I do know, like with Morgan, when I was first starting out, like he's my mentor, and I would every 2 weeks I'd be on the phone. Call him, hey man, what's going on? You want to go out for a beer? And stuff like that. And he's like, I love you, man. I love you, but like pushy. And so it was great to have that mentor that was like would tell me how it is and stuff like that. And even in my first writer's room on that show, I remember like I was so excited and I was like throwing out a million ideas in the meeting, and he's like pulls me aside, he's like, look, calm down. he's like, you have great ideas. Something always sticks, but I don't need to hear 1,000 ideas until you get to that one. Just let it process. And it was very constructive way. I mean, I'm saying it a little more bluntly, but he was very kind about how he said, like, listen to the room. Sometimes the best idea comes out of someone else's idea, and building upon that. You don't have to have, you don't have to go, because I would do things. I remember one of my episodes, it ended up being the season opener, season 2. I'm like, everybody's like in the middle of pitching and they're having a conversation. And I came up with an idea in the middle. I wasn't listening to any of them. And I go, sleeper spy. Tasha's a sleeper spy. And he's like, okay, that's a great idea. And he says, but we're going to put it after we finish this conversation. And then that became the season opener. But I was like, but I didn't even pay attention. So, again, it's about knowing, reading the room, reading the person that you're trying to contact. How many times have you'll email someone and have just missed out on something, or you're too early, and it's really, there's a lot of luck in the timing. But if you do it at the right intervals, they're thinking about you because they're going to go with whatever writer is top of their mind at the time. So
because usually there's like a spot or two that a head writer might reserve for a new writer or to try someone out, and then you following up might just fit into that if the timing is right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do remember like when I got Thomas and then when I got Dewdrops, I'm like, there's a million writers that want a job from me. And I'm like, I could reach out to them, but whoever reaches out to me, I'm going to give them the job because, I know I'm going to get a million requests once it's announced that I'm working on something or someone hears from it. So I'm like, that way I don't have to be like choosing. And so a lot of people were reaching out to me. I'm like, okay, this guy reached out to me. he gets an episode. And so it really is about that time. I mean, even for me, like in top of December, I reached out to a production company that I hadn't talked to in about 7 months, 8 months. And I said, hey, I'm just checking in the end of the year if you had anything development. And they're like, oh, we have this thing, but it's due on Thursday. This was a Monday. Like we have an open bake off. And I was like, I'm in. And so, but if I had not reached out or waited another week, I'm not part of that bake off.
That's a great segue. What does that kind of hustle look like at your level? Someone who's created shows, who's been doing this so long, how is the hustle the same and how is it different from when you started?
It's different in the sense that I've reached an age where I don't need to sugarcoat. I don't need to pretend that like, hey, let's get a cup of coffee. I'm pretty direct and say, what you got going on? Got anything for me? And I don't recommend a new writer do that. You know,
What do you got for me?
You know, I mean, plenty. I feel like the right way for new writers to be like, hey, can I pick your brain? Because I will ask to read your script if I like you. Don't say, can you read my script in the first interaction? So, but I usually will ask, you know, if I have a good interaction with someone, I'll ask. Unless it's, you know, like I'm trying to sell something, will you get attached? I'm like, no, I don't write other people's ideas. And so I think that, so for me, I'm a little more direct these days. And I don't know, I just don't have that. I mean, I feel like, you know, also with my experience too, it's like I gotta put myself out there to a certain extent and let people know I'm available, what I'm willing to do. And so, because a lot of people don't know, I think I was saying this before, like, you know, people just thought I might want to just be showrunner. I'm like, those jobs don't grow on trees.
Right. So you have to communicate just so people know how to help you, right? Sometimes. And they don't know if you don't communicate that.
Yeah, and I hope I'm not, you know, I personally hope I'm, at least in my delivery of these things, that I'm not being brusque. Like, what do you got? I'm not really like that.
I don't think you have that reputation.
Yeah, but, you know, it's like, you know, I went to my first kids screen this year down in San Diego. And for people that don't know, that's this big event for, you know, for animation and live action kids writing and television. And so I went down there and I went there kind of off the books. I didn't buy a pass, but a lot of people are just lobby rats, mostly writers.
Oh yeah, it's like going to Comic-Con and just hanging out in town.
Exactly.
Like it's totally fine.
And so yeah, I got to bump into a bunch of people, but it was a good excuse to reach out to people afterwards if I saw them for 2 seconds. And so that's a good way to that's why these networking events, I really recommend that for emerging writers. If there are these things, you know, like TAG, the Animation Guild does events, and there's a lot of different animation writer events out there. Go to those events, bump into those people, and then they do remember you. Then you can do the follow-up. And then it's like, even if you saw them 6 months ago and you're worried about bugging them, if you bump into them there, you know, that's great. You know, that's why, like, that's something I wish I had done in the beginning of my career. I was very cautious and didn't go to many parties. I didn't go to many events. I didn't network enough. And so I think that's why things stalled after VIP for me too.
So going back to that for a moment, that gap, that long gap you had after your first job, was your network just not big enough at that point? It was very that TV show. And then it was like, well, they're all out of work too now. So where do you go?
Yeah, I mean, and then most of us after that show, again, it was the death of the syndication era. So So a lot of people were older writers that didn't work ever again. And some of them were just kind of like floated around for a while or got these kind of odd jobs. And so, yeah, I didn't, you know, my network, unfortunately, you know, it was Morgan, you know,
right,
and so I kind of hitched my wagon to him, and it's like he's not gonna be, you know, he didn't get another showrunner gig right away. He got like a producer job on the show. He wasn't the head guy, and so he can't bring me in. He's just happy to get his job, and so it was kind of a. Again, I just didn't network enough. I didn't party enough. And so, yeah, but it's true because like one of the times I went to a party, you know, I went to one of these parties and I met this guy. We're just hanging out talking about video games or whatever. And I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I'm the president of USA Network. I'm like, oh, he's like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a writer. He's like, let's get together. Now, if my manager or my agent or myself tried to reach out to him, not at the party, I never would have got a meeting, but because we socially met, you know, I had a meeting, he read my scripts, he tried to get me onto a show. I mean, it was great. And I wish I had done more of that in the beginning.
Yeah. So that takes me to my next question, which is common mistakes you see early writers do, or even that you made. And it sounds like when you have your first job, that's the time to expand your network. Use that job, not in the wrong kind of way to line up your next gig, but at least to meet people, because it's easier to meet people when you have a job.
100%. Yeah. I mean, you have to, and especially like in animation, like I do recommend that writers, even if they're on staff, start freelancing if you get the opportunity on the side, because that's how you're going to get your next job, getting to meet as many people, letting them see your work in action. And so, but yeah, I think you really have to start, setting up that next job and those relationships and having those meetings. And the thing is, there's also this worry, and I get this worry too, like meeting too many people all at once. You're like, well, what if you get 2 job offers and then you turn one down? Like, they want you more.
Yeah, or just give me that problem. Like, what do you get all these job offers? It's like, just, yeah.
So
I remember one time I was probably in my first job, and I met someone from Crunchyroll, but the anime company. And then at that same party, I met someone else from Crunchyroll, and I got both of their business cards. And then I emailed one of them first, like after the event, and I didn't hear back like 3 or 4 days later. And I thought, I'll just email the other person too. And then that person replied, the second person I emailed, and I set up a meeting. And then the other person emailed me back, and I also set up a meeting. And so I went to the office to meet with person number 1. I had a great general meeting. They told me the whole pitch about Crunchyroll, and then I left. And then like a week later, I went back to the office to meet with person number 2. And I felt like it was a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment where I was like, I don't know what to do. I have 2 meetings with the same company. I'll just go. And she was pitching like the same spiel. And I was sitting there going like, oh, okay. And then at one point, she goes, oh, and I know you were here last week, and that's totally fine. You should meet everyone on the team. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But I just remembered like, yeah, just that moment of, how do I say no? What do I do? I'll just take the meeting. What's the worst that could happen?
I did something similar. Like I not that long ago, I wrote an email. Like there was like multiple contacts at this company. So I wrote them all the same email, basically. Like I didn't change a word other than their names. I'm like, hey, I'd love to get together. But I'm like, who is it? And then they CC'd all of them on the reply. And I was like, oh my God, they just saw that I wrote the same email to all of them. Like, hope you're doing well. And I was like, oh, God. But I got the meeting and it worked out. But still, I was like, I'm mortified.
At least I thought you were going to say, you sent an email with a, hey, name. Like,
well, I'm sure you've gotten contracts where it's got the other person's name on them and stuff.
Yeah, I did get like a LinkedIn message one time that was like, not meant for me. And then the person just the next day sent me what was meant for me. And I thought, you know what? I took 2 meetings at Crunchyroll, like that happened. It's partially it's a numbers game, right?
Right.
You have to assume most people are not going to get back to you, or not going to get back to you in a timely fashion. And it's not personal. And you just have to keep going, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
So what do you do to stay productive in between jobs?
I mean, like I said, the interesting thing for me these days is it is very hard for me to write on spec lately. I've been writing consistently for pay for a long time, whether it's freelance animation. So it is hard for me to get motivated on my own things. So I did write over the summer a great, new spec kidcom, and I was really excited to get motivated. I started writing a new Hallmark type movie on spec, but it's so daunting to get 120 pages out. So I'm like, let me do a 30 page sitcom. And so I was able to motivate for that. But I mean, for me, motivation comes from exercise. Like I am a runner. Now I am a pickleball player with my wife, and
gives you something to focus on that is not anything to do with your industry.
Yeah, and I feel like that really helps reset me and keep me focused. And but yeah, I mean, again, I'm always working on an idea or something, and so but usually I get motivated into an idea that I can pitch more than write. So I do love coming up with pitches.
This is something I ask every guest. It's called the rule I break.
Okay.
Every industry has rules. Some are there for a reason, and some are just begging to be broken. So what's a rule in your field that you don't follow or believe in?
I mean, I'm sure you're going to get this every time you get a writer in here, but the rule I break is, there's supposedly rules to screenwriting that are made up rules that these gatekeepers came up with, like don't write "we see" in a script, don't show stage directions. And in live action, they're like, never hint that there's a camera. And I'm like, every word we put on the page is a direction for somebody. The words, the dialogue is the direction for the actor. When you say the room is blue, that's for the set decorator. You are setting up the stage. So if you need an occasional like pull back to a reveal, or you need to say "we see," I mean, people think "we see" is lazy. Maybe it is. It doesn't matter if the script reads well and people like it. It doesn't matter. And so I guess new writers will complain with that because they'll say, well, you don't have to go through the same gatekeepers anymore. So that is true. So if you can say "we see" better, great, go for it. But if you use it, sometimes it's not a big deal because at the end of the day, real people reading scripts don't care. And so that's the main rule that I break.
Before we go, I like to do a rapid fire round.
Let's do it.
What's the last book you read?
The last book I read was, and I'm kind of bummed out about it. It's I read Persuader, a Jack Reacher novel by Lee Child. And so that's now this season of Reacher is that book.
Is that like the first one in the series or what?
No,
where does that fall?
it's somewhere in the middle of the series. So
how was it?
I actually, it's my least favorite.
So why were you bummed?
That was bummed because that's the season they decided to make. But the show is doing a really good job this season with it. But that was the last book I read.
What's a movie you love rewatching?
The Proposal with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds.
Nice. If it wasn't this, what's another career field you could see yourself in?
Oh my gosh, this one will take thinking. Because like I said, I never planned to do anything other than writing.
No backup plan.
No backup plan. But I guess teaching.
Worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Yeah, the worst piece of advice I got career-wise was to see a consultant about one of my films getting made.
What kind of consultant? And what film was this?
I wrote this independent film, and the consultant, someone said, I had just moved out to LA, and I wrote this. This was my second script I had ever written, or third. And someone said, "Oh, this is pretty good. You should meet with this consultant who helped make, X, Y, and Z get made." And I was like, great. And so she charges $200. And I'm like, I had just moved to LA. I mean, I'm like, I had no money. I had to scrape it together to get the $200 to meet with her. And it was such an exciting, meeting. She's like, I'm going to get you David Arquette and blah, blah. Never heard from her again. And then whenever someone now says like, hey, I'm talking to this consultant, I'm like, don't talk to the consultant. Don't.
I can't even imagine. Why not call yourself a producer? I don't know. That's just so weird. What kind of? It's just a scam, I guess, right?
It is, and the other thing is, the scam to avoid is like a manager that like charges you for like postage and copies. Like managers and agents get paid when you get paid. You don't pay anything up front.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then the last one: best piece of advice you've ever received.
I think the best piece of advice, I would say, Jeff Agassi, he said this to me. He's like, if you want an answer today, I can get you one. It just won't be the one you want. So I
love that.
It's about patience and waiting for the right time. So, and he's repeated that mantra to me a few times over my career, but I think it's patience.
I've definitely heard that from Jeff too, and I think that's a great one. Rick, I just want to say thank you. This was such a pleasure having you come on. You alluded earlier to taking meetings, a lot of meetings with up-and-coming writers. You've done so much for me in my career. The same can be said for so many writers, and I really appreciate you, all that you've done, and thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Man, I'm so glad you called, and I do have to say, you can cut this out if you want to, but seeing your career trajectory has been like so gratifying. We met when you were a script coordinator on Tots, and you had one writing credit to your name, and to see you become this great writer and creator, it's just, like I said, it's so wonderful to see, because Brandon has written for me on many shows now, and he's just gotten better and better, and he's now one of my ringers. So it's just really awesome to be here and, kind of share this conversation with you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm definitely leaving that in. I think I'm going to cut that, put it in the front of the podcast. Before we go, where can people find you or your work?
Oh my gosh. You can find me, like my Instagram and Facebook are private. So just people I know, but I'm on LinkedIn. I rarely use Twitter. That's usually just kind of an announcement. It's at Rick Suvalle, and same thing at LinkedIn. You can find my name there. But I love meeting new writers. I love meeting new people. So if people reach out and because they saw this or listen to this, that's great.
Awesome. Well, Rick, one more time, thank you.